This workshop is part of a series of mindscape activities that connects people to nature through art. Mindscape is a Wye Valley area of outstanding natural beauty and Artspace Synderford project. It's part of the Foresters Forest, the National Lottery Heritage Fund and the Landscape Partnership Programme. Each of the YouTube clips is accompanied by a step-by-step activity guide that you can download from the Artspace Synderford website. For this session we're going to be looking at impressed clay decoration. We're using a variety of natural objects, some normal household objects. We're going to impress them into the surface of the clay to create an interesting repeat pattern or texture. Interestingly, primitive people would use things like animal bones and pebbles or their fingernails to press into the surface of their pots to create this highly decorative effect. So let's have a look at the materials that we're going to use. What you're definitely going to need is some form of clay. I suggest air dry clay. That's going to be quite accessible for most people. This incidentally is fireable clay, but as we're in the middle of the lockdown, I'm just going to improvise and use what I've got. Now the objects that you use, the natural forms that you're going to impress into the clay, here's a selection I've got, but you may have something quite different. It just depends on whereabouts you are. Maybe you could go for a walk in your garden or a walk outside in the forest, or even just a rummage around in your shed. But in my little collection of objects, I've got things like an interesting sort of animal vertebrae bone there, pine cones, feathers, lovely rolled bit of bark, little stump of an antler that I found, some acorn shells, an old bottle that I found in the forest, a horn, a random horn, but also a few other objects that I picked out of a drawer, such as a paper clip, an old bottle cap, a key and a fridge magnet. What I would suggest you do first is have a little experiment to see what textures or patterns your objects make in the surface of the clay. I've rolled out this ball of clay previously. I've placed it onto a little wooden board, in this case a bit of plywood that I had kicking about, and it just stops it sticking to the table. You'll be surprised at some of the effects that you get from these rather ordinary objects. So let's have a go. I'm going to make the camera a bit closer just so you can see. So hopefully you can see this a little bit better. I'm going to just test out a selection of some of these objects just to see how effective the pattern is. This slab of clay that I've rolled out, I actually went over it with a hairdryer for a couple of minutes just to dry up the surface, as it was a little bit sticky, a little bit tacky. So when I first impressed an object into it, when I pulled it out, it wasn't as clean, it wasn't as accurate as it could have been. So maybe you need to consider doing that. So the first thing I'll test is this feather, and I'll just use the end to see what type of mark making I can achieve. I'm really looking at repeat patterns here, and that looks quite effective. I'll give you a close-up on these in a second. Wonder what this vertebrae looks like. Oh wow, that's quite a nice shape. Oh, okay. How about a pebble? That's rather nice as well. I've got this lovely little bit of branch from a pine tree, and I noticed that when you impress this into the clay, it gets a really nice texture. Again, I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's a wonderful little pattern taking place there. Let's have a go with this shell. I'm going to use the edge here. It's quite nice. How about something a bit different? This is a dried chili I must have had for about 20 years. What does this look like? Oh, I like that. That is quite a nice sort of organic texture. It's a found bottle. This should be quite nice. Etc, etc. So experiment with a few objects and see what works best before you apply it to your final piece of work. If you prefer the idea of using a tile, I'd recommend you cut a square, roughly 15-20 centimetres, and either use a collection of objects or possibly on separate tiles one object which you just repeat continuously. If you like the idea of doing the pinch pot, I'll show you now how to achieve this pretty straightforward form. Take a ball of clay, roughly the size of an apple, and form it between your hands. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to place it in my left hand, and we're going to try and create a small concave hole using my thumb. And as you can see, I'm slowly turning it around and around whilst gently squeezing it. And with a little bit of patience and just a little bit of sensitivity, you should be able to get yourself a little bowl that we can then decorate with our natural objects. Can you see this? I just knock it flat just to keep it level. And I'm being careful not to squeeze too hard and have sections that are too thin and some sections that are too thick. So I'm getting there. I've just spent 2 or 3 minutes forming this pinch pot. Don't worry if yours is a bit wonky, because the fun part really is in pressing the objects into the clay. And because we've had a little practice, we know what will work well in the surface, so hopefully get ourselves a really nice pattern. I'm going to go for the feather again, because I thought that was rather nice. Now for this demonstration, I won't go all the way around, but hopefully you can see that. I noticed this pine cone gave a really nice repeat pattern. I rolled it around the surface. I also rather liked that pebble as well. I'll just use that on the rim. So experiment with different objects you can find, either in the garden, possibly things you picked up on a walk, and see what impressed decoration you can achieve.